Really glad to have everybody here today. Today, we are going to have a really interesting conversation with Stephen Morris. He's one of our newest coaches in the CWC community, and he is a rock star. Former military turned corporate, turned this sucks. I hate it. Let me help other people navigate it that don't hate it quite as much. And so we've had a really good time getting to know each other as he's joined the community and really talk through some of the leadership lessons that you need to have and make as you're making that transition from career military to a corporate career. So Stephen, welcome. So glad to have you with us today.
It's awesome to be here. I'm so excited. Let's roll.
Let's do it. And so one of the fun things about our journeys as leaders is all the mistakes that we make and all of the things that we do, and other people can benefit from that. So Stephen, I'm going to throw a quick question at you in terms of when you first made that transition. What do you think one of your biggest mistakes was that you've learned from and that now you're kind of helping your clients through as well?
Actually, we were just talking about this. One of the hardest mistakes to overcome, or mindset. I don't even know if it's a mindset, but it's the way you communicate. In the military, we give and receive orders, and we're taught to not question, just do what you're told, and shut up and go do. That's how we work. So, and if you have a leader in the military that will give you the big picture, that's great, but that is a luxury that's few and far between. In the civilian world, y'all don't talk like that.
No, we all don't, right? So yeah.
So that was really hard, and for the first several months I couldn't understand why no one would respond to me positively, because it's not like I was barking orders like you would see in a drill sergeant in a movie or something like that. But people that they didn't see me as respecting them or whatever, because there was no please, there was no thank you, there was none of that what's the word, politeness, if you would, to my communication. And it was all just very dry, very upfront, and just go do. And yeah, people didn't like me at all. And I'm a great guy.
You're a likable guy, right?
I was hated. Everyone hated me. So that was my first big lesson. And I am so thankful. I was so blessed. My first boss right out of the military, and my first corporate job, was retired military himself. So he totally understood what I was going through.
Good.
And he was able to identify my problems and coach and mentor me through it. So yeah, it was horrible.
Did you know people hated you, or was that just something that had to be told to you?
It was very obvious people did not like me, and that was hard because I don't really care if people like me. I'm not like, my existence isn't based on people's opinion of me, but at the same time I'm still human and I still have feelings, and it's like, oh, everyone hates me. So it did weigh on me, that I was just this hated person. And once I understood why, it was so funny. Looking back, I wish I had a video of it, because looking back, like, I would be like, hey Tammy, go do this, please. And it was so forced and not genuine. It was but it was awesome and ultimately super beneficial, because people could see me trying, and they finally realized, like, so that he's basically a robot, like, that's what they called me. And it's like, but they could see me trying, and they understood none of this came natural to me anymore. And so, like, that effort really went a long way to help me build my team into the successful team that ultimately I ended up achieving while I was there. But it took time. It took a lot of time.
Well, especially, how many years were you in the military?
16.
Right. So that's a lot of conditioning to unwind.
Right.
And, when you're coming in, especially in a leadership position where you're supposed to inspire and motivate and, collaborate, and they're like, who is this knucklehead? And where'd you find him? And why is he here? And you're like, hey, you're supposed to really respect me because I know what I'm doing. And so it's a really difficult transition to make. Although it's interesting because I'm not sure that the military people have the corner on the market of not knowing how to treat people well, right? In terms of, so while it makes sense that you came from command and control, and so changing your style and adapting your style to that is important. There's plenty of people in corporate who could learn that lesson too, right? In terms of, a little more politeness, a little more deference, and maybe some collaboration instead of, this is good. Yeah. It's not a democracy. We're doing what we need to do and move forward.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what you're talking about are people that genuinely do not love their people.
Right.
Right. I loved my team, every single person. Now, I do want to differentiate. There's a difference between love and like. Some of the best people I've ever met in my life, I met on my team in the military, and some of the worst in the same place. Okay. I loved every single one of them. I liked less than half of them. So it's okay not to like somebody, but you can still love them because they're a part of your team. They're your family. We don't like all the members of our family. So I think once people start to understand that, that'll benefit them a lot. But anyway, I digress. When the people you're talking about, they don't genuinely love their teams. I loved my team. It just was coming off that I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're in a leadership role and you can't find love for your team, you're probably in the wrong role, because you have to love your team members. You have to, they're your superstars, and they need to know that.
That's a great concept, right? In terms of, if you're not loving on your team, then find somebody, then you don't belong there, right? For sure. But knowing that your DNA and the things that came naturally to you were very much military driven, and that's kind of how you were brought up. How did you make that transition to being softer and gentler, Stephen, and still feel authentic?
Wow, that's a hard question, because it's a switch. I'm still me. I'm still a jerk. Like, but
I attract new clients. Hire me. I'm a jerk, right? So that's good.
But like I said, it's a switch. I've learned to turn it on and off. So I can still be genuinely me and be polite, because I know that most of you aren't going to respond to me if I'm being a jerk. And when I need to get your attention, when I need to enforce my will, then I can flip that switch back on and become Sergeant Morris again. Right. And, lay down the law if I have to. But it was really hard to learn that process. And it took me, I'm still learning. My wife tells me all the time, I'm not a freaking soldier. Like, my bad, babe. I'm sorry.
You've been out for a bit. So yeah, that definitely is a learning curve, right?
Yeah. So I think it was probably something I'll continue to improve on till the day I die.
Sure. Oh, always, right? And I think we're always, leveling up our game, learning something new, and, adding some new tools to our tool belt when we can. Absolutely. Making that transition from military to corporate is, it just seems like it's very, very two different ends of the spectrum, and leadership seems to be that binding connection. But when you work with your military people that are making that transition, how do you help them transition their skills from point A to point B?
So transitioning skills is a very complicated problem, because for a good example is I was an infantryman, which meant I was the tip of the spear in combat. On top of that, I was a ranger. So I was an advanced infantryman, and then on top of that, I was a sniper. So, like, none of that translates to civilian work unless you're going to go be a cop or FBI or something like that. So, I had to learn ways to take being a combat soldier and make it sound appealing to potential employers. And one of like a good example is I on my resume, I would say I learned how to effectively communicate in stressful, high-paced, and sometimes dangerous environments.
Okay.
Right. So you have to look at what you can't just say, oh, I'm a combat soldier. You have to look at what it entails. Are you an effective communicator in stressful environments? Absolutely, because communicating with somebody while you're getting shot at sucks. It's not easy.
And you don't have time to explain a lot of things, right? So,
So I mean, things like that. And then furthermore, one of the biggest problems we have is we like to use acronyms because in the military, everything is a freaking acronym. There is literally a book, a study guide that they give to, at least in the Army, that they give to new soldiers that is just acronyms that we have to learn. So civilians don't speak in acronyms. And if they do, that's industry specific acronyms, and they are not going to understand military acronyms unless they're retired military themselves. So don't use acronyms. That's simple, but it's really hard because we're so used to communicating that way. You know, when if I'm sharing a story and I say, yeah, this one time I got in a tick, like you think,
you're going to get Lyme disease.
insect,
That's what I
right?
think. Yeah. Careful.
Yeah. That actually stands for troops in contact. So it doesn't translate at all to the civilian world. So stop speaking in acronyms. And then civilians love to hear our stories, right? Especially if you were deployed or have cool training stories. Civilians love to hear those
It was
things.
very Rambo, right? So yeah,
Right.
for sure. Mhm.
And soldiers have that we learn this skill to tell a story that isn't lying, but very embellished, if you will. So like, instead of fighting 100 dudes single-handedly, it was like 4, but
Hey, but you're still by yourself.
when you got 4 dudes trying to kill you, it might as well be 100 because it's scary either
It
way.
feels
So
like it. Yeah.
but yeah, civilians love to hear our stories. So tell your stories. Share how your experience and story form when you're in that interview. Share how that's going to bring value to the company, and civilians are going to really resonate with that.
All right. So those are great tips, right? So you want to make sure that the things that you've done, you can relate them to corporate, just to bring it back a bit. De-acronymize your conversation and use kitchen English when possible. And then also tell great stories, because people love stories, all kinds, right? So whether they're action military stories or whatever they happen to be, I think all storytelling is relevant, in terms of getting people, especially during an interview process. And I think one of the other places that stories really come in handy is when you're trying to create a scenario for people to be able to understand and connecting those dots, right? So many times you can use a metaphor or stories to explain, this is like this. Right. And they're like, oh, now I get it, right? And so whenever you can use fun adventure stories to help, get people on board with whatever's going on as you're leading, that also helps a lot, I think.
Absolutely. Storytelling and leadership is one of the key things I teach. Because like you said, excuse me, it resonates and it's going to make you it's going to humanize you. Yeah. So as opposed to just being their boss, now all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I went through that. And then you share the story and it's like, okay, well, you went through it. You understand how I feel. You survived. I'm going to survive too. Like it's just a great way to build that personal relationship with your team members.
Mm-hmm. And that applies, military or not, right? Humans are
Absolutely.
Humans, and they need to have that related. You just have cooler stories. I only get to talk about, trying to keep financial executives out of jail. You get to talk about saving your own lives. So it's kind of fun. And so, networking and, in the CWC programs, we talk about building your power base a lot in terms of, it's not just knowing people, but it's knowing people who will advocate for you, be your sponsor, and really help you grow in your career. And so when you're making a transition from an industries, two industries that are so far apart from each other, what kind of advice do you give your clients on how to start fresh?
So the first thing is, in the military, we're never alone. So you'll hear us say things like battle buddies or shipmates, or I don't know what they call them in the Air Force, wingmen. Um, so, battle buddies, shipmates, wingmen, those are the people that always have your back and they're always with you. You're never without them. And they're constantly protecting you, helping you, whatever you need. And then you're doing the same for them. Just because you're leaving the military doesn't mean you don't need a battle buddy. And a battle buddy is not your spouse. That's just not your spouse. So get out of the military, find your battle buddy. There's tons of networking. There's tons or networking platforms like LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. There are tons of programs that the VA offers. Companies will offer their own networking. Whatever company you work for, they usually have a lot of veteran assistant programs that you can utilize to expand your network that way. But just find people to be in your corner, that to have your back at all times.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is always be on the lookout. So if you're getting into the automotive engineering, there are tons, if you search for it, there are tons of events for automotive engineers. I have no idea what they are because I'm not an automotive engineer, but there are tons of events, I'm sure, for them. And so go to those events, go meet people in your industry, get them to like you, get them in your corner. And then the final thing I would say is always volunteer. And this is something I wish I had done from the very beginning. And this is more fronts than just networking. As a soldier, airman, sailor, Marine, whatever you are defined by your service to your country. More importantly, you're defined by your service to the people to your left and right. And literally that builds your character. That is who you are. I didn't understand that. It took me a couple of years to understand that. When I finally did understand that, I started volunteering, and what that did is it gave me a new sense of purpose. Right, my sense of purpose was gone. I had no sense of purpose, which led to years of depression. And I am an emotional eater. Apparently, I didn't know this about myself, but it was between depression and emotional eating, I gained a bunch of weight, got really sad, all that. And then I started volunteering, and it was like a switch flipped. Volunteering really reintroduced a sense of purpose into my life. So on top of that, it allowed me to meet people that, man, you talk about some really cool people. And so that really bolstered my network, hand over fist. So volunteer as soon as you get out, have something to do, volunteer. With that being said, take your time. If you have, in the military, we call it terminal leave. So however much vacation time basically you have saved up, you get to take it at the very end, right? When you in term of service, ETS. So you get it to, for myself, I had 3.5 months saved up. So that was 3.5 months I could have just taken off and got paid the entire time.
Okay.
I didn't do that like an idiot. I went to work 2 weeks later and looking at, man, I wish I had just taken my time off, reintegrated, got my feet on the ground. So take your time, volunteer, and just relax, chill. It's going to be okay.
So let's talk about this reintegration. Because you and I have had quite a few conversations about that, not only for yourself, but your friends and your colleagues that have come back. And I think it's worth talking about because, so many people go through it. And I think one of the things, and I'm going to have you, kind of talk about this a little bit more, but the concept was such a foreign concept to me when you talked about it, in terms of you're away for years on end. You come back for a couple weeks, you go back. By the time you're done and you come back home, like the furniture is in a different place. And, people have built different relationships, and you feel like you're an outsider coming back into a life that you thought you knew. And so, share some of your experiences and some of your colleagues' experiences with that, and how you make that transition, and why that ETA, if that's the right word, is so important to use that to readjust.
Yeah. So for me, like I said, I was in the Army from August 2001 to July 2017. And during that time, I don't think I was home for a year straight, but maybe 3 times. Yeah, I think about 3 times I was home for a consecutive year.
Okay.
I was just constantly either deployed, training, or sent on a non-combat mission. Non-combat mission.
Correct. Non-publicly available, combat mission.
So,
right.
But yeah, I was constantly gone. I was constantly moving. And when you come home from that, it's pretty easy because, yes, the family has changed, the kids have grown, the house doesn't look like what it did when you left, but it doesn't matter because you have to get back into training and get ready to deploy again. And so there's the reintegration during that whole phase was pretty easy for me. I think because it was so easy, because I was constantly moving like that, it didn't prepare me at all for the reintegration when it was gone. And so I tell people the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life was leave the military. I would take getting shot 10 times again over transitioning out of the military. Please just shoot me. I don't want to, it was horrible.
Hopefully in the leg though, right? So yeah.
I don't care. But yeah, so it was really hard. And there's nothing I can say that's going to prepare you for it. There's nothing in the military can do that's going to prepare you for it. The only thing you can do, the only thing I can tell you to do is get your mindset right. Understand it's going to be hard. Understand it's going to change. Everything's going to be different. People are going to be different. It's okay. You're going to be fine. But and especially like you look at the suicide numbers for veterans, the majority of the veterans that take their own life, unfortunately, are within 4 years of getting out of the military. If you can make it past 4 years, you're usually good. So, which is insane to me. And I think it's because of that process. It took me about 3 years to where I was comfortable being a civilian again. So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I totally lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I was going to ask, what were the parts that were most uncomfortable for you?
Talking to civilians.
Okay.
Well, like the military has its own language. In the infantry, we have our own language within a language.
Mm-hmm.
Jokes like, shooting somebody in the face. Like, it's a joke. Like, we're not actually going to shoot anyone in the face, but civilians typically don't think it's funny.
Right.
Like there are just tons of jokes. Our sense of humor
Especially
is
in
very
America
dark.
these days, right? So yeah,
Right.
that's actually not so funny. Yeah.
But like our sense of humor is typically in the military, our sense of humor is very dark. And that's a coping mechanism for all the stress and all the horrible things we have to deal with. Most of us typically just learn to laugh at it, even though we understand it's not funny. However, civilians don't understand that we understand that it's not funny, that we're just coping. And so that causes so much stress, Danny. It is horrible. I got so sick of people just looking at me like, seriously, did you just say that? I just stopped talking. Ultimately, like I just wouldn't talk anymore because I knew I was going to say something inappropriate that they wouldn't understand. And it was horrible. That was hands down the hardest, most horrible. Getting people to understand me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and I think that transition is, it's just important to give yourself the time you need and leverage the support that's available to be able to make that transition successfully.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is so much support. And almost every single veteran that gets out of the military, if they served longer, I would say, than 8 years, they're going to get out of the military saying, I don't want the VA. I don't want those, disability. I don't want any of that. That's not why I did what I did. No one owes me anything, yada, 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 which is funny. I'll get back to that. No one owes me anything here in a minute. But, that's typically their mentality. And it's use the resources that you've earned. You've earned that disability. You've earned that GI Bill, the college tuition.
Yes.
You've earned all that free medical. You've earned all that stuff. I don't care if you weren't in combat. The military in general is hard on your body. They say for every year you spend in the military, you take 4 off of your life expectancy. So, I mean, that's obviously not exact, but we do have a much shorter life expectancy, especially for a career soldier like myself. So, you've earned all those things just because of the stressful environment you had to live with for however many years. So use your benefits, use the VA, use the company military assistance programs, whatever they are, use all of it. It's going to help you so much in the long run. I know it seems uncomfortable, but I promise it's going to help you. And then to the fact of no one owing you anything. Ultimately, what ended up happening is I developed this sense of entitlement. Not entitlement, that's the wrong word, but I can't think of a good word for it. So we're going to go with entitlement. Where I just thought I was so disgusted with civilians because in my view, civilians had no drive, no motivation, no sense of purpose, no mission, no anything. They were just, I show up at work at 9 o'clock, I go home at 5 o'clock, and then I rinse, repeat. And it's like, dude, what are you living for? Like, have purpose. And and they did, I just couldn't see it. I was blind because it wasn't my sense of purpose. Right. And so ultimately what that did is it put a giant chip on my shoulder to where I just thought I was better than everyone around me. If you weren't a veteran, you weren't fill in the blank. I'm not proud of it. It's really embarrassing that ultimately that's how I ended up thinking. But most of the veterans I talk to, they're either going through that or they identify like, yeah, totally, that was me too. I don't think I've talked to a single career veteran that didn't have that mindset at one point in time after they got out. So I'm here to, like, the sooner you, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't think like that, and you've only been out a year, I promise you do. And you need to be honest with yourself, identify it, and deal with it. The sooner you deal with it, the sooner your life is going to become so much easier, because it's a drag to have that mindset, and it's going to drag you down. It's going to suck. Just face it, get it over with, identify the problems, and fix it.
So how do you fix it?
A lot of mental work. Um, and when I'm talking to vets, they typically don't like me because, or at that moment in my talk, because I usually tell them like, dude, you're not special. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, like, oh, I was a Navy SEAL. Congratulations, you ain't special, homie. Like, well, civilians can't do what I did. You're right, and that's a good thing. You don't want them to do what you did
Because you're a
because
jerk and they kill you.
well, not everybody's built to do what we do.
Mhm.
And that's okay. It's okay for Tammy to be, CEO powerhouse. It's okay for me to be Navy SEAL powerhouse or Army Ranger or Special Forces, whatever. It's okay for us to have our different worlds. And that's how it should be. But just because you didn't do what I did, doesn't make you any less than I am. So it's just a lot of mental work of tearing yourself down and rebuilding yourself. Um, in basic training, one of the things that drill sergeants are very good at doing is they literally tear you down. That's why they're always screaming at you, cursing at you, making you do physical exercise, just making your life literally miserable. It's because they want to take the civilian out of you, and then they're going to rebuild a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, whatever the case may be. And there's a very structured way in which they do it, and they're very good at it. And you can instantly tell the people that some people it doesn't work for,
Mhm.
and you can tell instantly, and they usually get kicked out of the military within the first year.
Mhm.
And we even have a title for it. It's called failure to adapt. You
Okay.
get kicked out for failure to adapt. And so I mean, when you get out of the military, you basically have to do the exact same thing. You got to tear yourself down, strip all the military off of you, and rebuild yourself. Unfortunately, you don't have six angry, very large men screaming at you to do it. So it
Maybe
takes a
it would
lot
help if they
longer.
did, right? So, you go through an acclimatization. Well, that's not even a word, but anyway, it is today phase, right? And now you have to, deacclimate and get
Right.
ready. So if they had another, basic training for civilian life, maybe that would help a little bit.
Actually, that's a really good idea. We should do that.
Put
We,
that in
we
the
should
suggestion box. Yeah.
we should build that. That would be amazing.
Right. Just to, okay, we're going to put you back, better than you came, but still getting you ready for that civilian life.
Absolutely.
And so a big part of what we talk about in CWC, especially during, on our career strategy side, is how to pivot careers without having to take a step back.
Mhm.
Whether you're moving from military to civilian life, whether you're moving from one big industry to another, or moving from an industry into your own business, whatever the case may be, the point is we don't want to have to change and be happy and then give up everything we've worked so hard for.
Mhm.
And, there's ways to do that successfully, and there's ways to screw it up, which is why the programs work. So what advice do you have, for military leaders who have really gone literally through the ranks and been able to accelerate their career? How do they keep that same momentum once they make that shift over into corporate?
So that's another big mindset deal that was really hard for me is, as a sergeant first class, which isn't the highest, but it's pretty high.
It's pretty high.
It's my pay scale was up there. I made decent money. And so I would say sergeant first class and above, and then major on the officer side and above. Um, when you get into the civilian world, no one cares what your rank was. No one cares. And that's really hard because I worked my butt off to get to where I was. And if you're getting out of the army and you're a colonel or a general, you have worked your butt off to get there. And so it's really hard to digest that no one cares what rank you were, what you did. It doesn't serve them, so they don't care. Some people might think it's cool, but ultimately, just because they think it's cool doesn't do anything. They still don't really care. So getting your mind wrapped around that fact and not letting it hurt your feelings is
Mhm.
going to be the biggest service to you, probably than anything. It's okay that they don't care. They don't need to care, right? You're the only one that cares, and that's okay. Care, but don't expect anyone else to. Um, and then once you start getting out, once you start the process, the sooner you start, the better. I started, I want to say 3 months from retirement. Horrible plan. Horrible. Don't everything I did, don't do because I did it all the wrong way. I would say bare minimum, start a year out, sit down with a piece of paper and build a plan. The more you plan, the more you have an idea of how things are going to go, the better off you'll be. And if you're coming from the military, plans never work. Like in the army we have a saying, the enemy always has a say in every plan, which causes them to always fail. So with your understanding that your plan is going to horribly fail, that's okay. It still gives you an idea of how to adapt and keep your momentum moving forward, even though your plans are failing. I didn't have a plan. I had one idea of what I was going to do, which I was going to get out and go be a cop.
Okay.
And I lived in Germany at the time, and I never watched the news, so I had no idea what was going on in the United States in 2017 and how much people hated the cops. And
You're safe for staying in the military.
right.
Yeah.
And so I get out and I come home, and it's like, defund the police. I'm like, I, I don't want any part of this world.
Yeah. No thanks.
No thanks. So, and then then it's like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do I do? Like, I had no plan. I had no idea. So build a plan and just be ready for that plan to go up in smoke, adapt, overcome, and then just keep moving forward. But each service members is going to be unique. Unfortunately, and I think that's where the VA really struggles, is that it's so unique for every single service member that you can't really pinpoint a specific thing. So we can say generic things like have a plan, have a backup plan, have a tertiary plan, but it doesn't really do service. The best thing you can do is find a mentor or a guide that has been there, done that, and can help you think. Because a lot of times when you get into the suck, as we would call it, it's hard to see what exactly you need to do. And a second set of eyes is always a good thing. So get your battle buddy, get yourself a mentor. Like, fortunately, I fell into, I didn't actively seek a mentor. I just kind of fell into it. So
Luck
thank
over
you.
skill sometimes, right? So
Right.
yeah.
So yeah, that's the best I have to offer. Just build a plan, a good plan.
Yeah. And a few backups, and it's interesting because when you make the mention of your rank in the military, people don't care. I think I don't think that's it. I think they don't understand.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
So for example, especially in American culture, very much of what you do is like, we got to put people in a box. So the first questions you're going to ask is name, rank, and serial number in civilian terms, right? So it's like, who are you? What do you do for a living? Meaning, what's your title and who do you work for? Because then we get a sense of, oh, I'm a cashier at Walmart versus I'm a managing director for Goldman Sachs, right? You're going to put people in that box. So when you say you're a E76 or whatever the hell the numbers are you guys use, no one understands it.
No.
Whereas if they understood that, oh, okay, so when you're this, that means, you're leading teams of thousands of people, you're, doing secret, black ops missions, all these things, so I don't think it's a matter of they don't care, because we always want to put people in a place so we can kind of compartmentalize them, but we have no idea what you're talking about. So if there's a way to translate that into terms people can understand, like, oh, it's like, I was basically a VP in a military, right? Or, a director or something that translates into more corporate speak.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's not that civilians don't care, but to us, our perception is that no one cares. And then you're absolutely right. If you break it down in civilian terms, they'll be, oh, that was really cool.
That's cool. Okay. I know where to put you now, right?
Yeah.
In terms
So
of how to
I was the logistical supervisor and personnel manager of an entire platoon, which consists of anywhere from 50 to 80 people. And we were the tip of the spear. We were the leading fighting force. And when we start breaking it down, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But if I just like, I was a platoon sergeant in Alpha Company, 27 Cav, yada yada yada. Like, people are like, I don't know what any of that means.
I have no idea what you just said. None of this makes sense to me. Yes. And so I think having that decoder ring, to make that translation from military to corporate, to contextualize your experiences, your capabilities, the impact that you're able to make, your leadership is really important, right? You've got that acronym book that you're given when you start in the military. Every corporation has their own speak. We even at CWC have our own speak. I know Christine and I were laughing one day because we were texting back and forth, and I think there was 2 lines and like 7 acronyms in those 2 lines. And no one else knew what we meant, right? So it's just kind of funny that way. But having that advisor to help you be that decoder ring to say, okay, this is what you've done. This is where you're landing. Here's how you translate that into terms people care about and understand. That would smooth out that transition and speed that up significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are tons of resources out there. Some free, some paid, depending on what you want. I did not hire someone to write my resume for me. I'm like, I'm going to do it myself. I can write. That was horrible plan. Did not go the way I wanted. So looking back, I wish I'd hired it. Like I said, I don't do what I did. Everything if you want to know what to do, ask me what I did and do the opposite and you'll probably win. But the VA has a ton of resources depending on what industry you're going into. They kind of focus on like the medical or engineering side. I feel like they favor that. But they have a ton of resources available for people transitioning out of the military you can use. You can hire someone like me, or you. That was a joke.
No, it's not.
Anyway,
It's serious. You can hire someone like Steven. It's not a joke. That's why you're
no,
here.
I said or you.
Yes.
But anyway, never mind. But yeah, you can hire someone to help you. I definitely recommend hiring someone to write your resume. And if you go to va.gov/resume career something like that. I can't remember. I can put it in the show notes or send it so you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But they have a specific resource of resume writers that work only with the military. So you can throw out all the acronyms and they already have a decoder ring to translate everything you say, everything you do to put it into from military terms to civilian terms. And so, like I said, the resources are out there. You just have to look for them and find them.
Yeah.
Fortunately for you, I have a list of probably thousands of resources that I've found over the years. So if you want to just email me, I'll send it to you.
Right.
But
yeah, and that's always helpful, right? Knowing where you can go. And I think once you're inside the organization, depending on the size of the company, but there's so many veteran groups within these organizations, right? So a lot of companies, actively hire military because they need that culture, that talent, that different point of view to help their business grow and add to the diversity. And so even once you're inside an organization, seeking out other, former military people is probably easier than, and more well laid out than doing it from the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because there are companies that have tried to recruit me that they're like, we have this amazing military or what's the word, group basically. And but it's when you see someone walking down a hall, if you've been in the military long enough, like, oh, that dude's prior service, what branch were you in? Like instantly you can tell. Just like, I'm sure you can tell by the way someone speaks if they know, if they've worked in the stock market or the banking industry, because just the way they talk is very, just the way someone walks, you can tell if they're military because they walk with a certain gait. So I mean, definitely. But it just utilize whatever you can find, definitely, and always be looking. Google. I mean, there's no reason, honestly, to not know anything anymore, because you just get your Google foo strong and you'll do much better than I did.
You should have a list of all the mistakes you made so they know where to go, right? And and the things that they've done. So one last question, then we're going to open it up for questions that I've got for you in terms of, there's inevitable gaps from military experience to civilian skills, right? In terms of
Mhm.
bringing that to the office specifically.
Mhm.
And so what have you found successful in terms of closing those legitimate skill gaps that go from carrying a backpack every day to sitting at a computer?
So first of all, like I said earlier, take your time off, enjoy it, reintegrate, reconnect. Um, and just being fully transparent. I was married from the time I joined the army till the time I got out of the army. And like I said, I didn't take any time to reconnect to my ex-wife and my kids, which ultimately was the reason for that we got divorced, is we just couldn't communicate anymore. Because all of a sudden I'm home all the time and there's no, it was just hard. And ultimately, I feel like if I had taken the time, just my time off, at least 3 months, to just be there, reconnect, focus on the communication, I feel like it would have really benefited our relationship. So take your time. Things have changed. If you've been in for 20 years, things are way different in the civilian life than whenever you joined at 18. The next thing is be engaged. Um, while I say take your time off, that doesn't mean be lazy and sit on the couch and watch TV. Get enrolled in school, go volunteer, work on a hobby. Anything that you would enjoy, focus on doing that. As far as communicating that to future employers, I have never found an employer that didn't understand, or that wasn't willing to understand what was going, the process. Yes, there's an employment gap. I transitioned from the military. I was in for 24 years, and now I'm applying for this job. Most of them ask, "Oh, that's cool. Well, what have you been doing with your time?" So that's why I say it's important to not just be lazy. You want to be able to answer that question. Well, I've been volunteering with this young men's organization, helping mentor young men and to becoming productive, men in society or whatever, which is what I did. So I guess I did one thing right. But yeah, totally. Don't be scared of the gap. I think a lot of people are like, oh, there can't be a gap. Employers are going to understand.
Yes, and appreciate in the long run, right? To be able to do that because you're coming to come back well balanced and ready for your next chapter.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So why don't we go ahead and open it up for questions? Anybody have any questions for Stephen? And then we'll give you some parting words.
I will say, while people are thinking, I'll make sure my email gets thrown out there. So if you're watching the replay of this and you do have questions, you can just shoot me an email and I respond. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Kelly's
You
got
can,
it. The ninja's
yeah,
on.
yeah.
We got a ranger and a ninja on the team, so we're in good shape. So nothing to worry about there. All right. Any questions for Stephen? If not, we'll open it up for parting shots.
Did you say party shots?
Party shots. Yes, parting shots.
I'm down.
Yeah.
Let me go get my bourbon.
That's it. That's it. I'm a mezcal girl now that I'm in Mexico City, right? So it's all about the mezcal. Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question. So you're going to take us out with a story. What was the most defining moment in your military career in terms of a story that just really made you appreciate life?
Which one you want? You want the one where I got shot, or you want the funny one where I got pushed out of the airplane?
You can choose.
So, the army decided in all its wisdom it was going to teach me how to jump out of airplanes. And my mantra for my entire adult life has pretty much been action breeds clarity. And this event is what caused me to come up with this mantra. And so, like I said, the army decided that in its infinite wisdom that I needed to learn how to jump out of airplanes, which, some people's like, yeah, that's cool. Not for me, because I am deathly scared of heights, like deathly scared. 4 feet off the ground, too high for me. Let me get down. I don't climb trees. I don't climb mountains. No, just no. There's no need for it. It's stupid. God meant for us to have our feet firmly planted on the ground, or we would have wings. Um, so yeah, the army is like, yeah, you're gonna do this. I said no. They said, you don't get to say so. So go through the training, and I decide that the best way to do this is to basically like ripping off a band-aid, right? You just do it quick and easy. Best way to do that when jumping out of airplanes, be the first one to jump, right? Just be at the back of the line because you jump out of the back of the airplane. So be at the back of the line, be the first one out. You only got to do it 4 more times, and hopefully I never have to do it again. So I finagle myself to the back of the line, which was risky because there is an order in which we were supposed to line up, which I totally violated the rules. And so, but they didn't catch me. So, I'm a ninja too, Kelly. So anyway, we get on the plane, we get up in the air. I can't remember how high we were. I want to say we were like 4,000 feet, maybe 5,000 feet. But I Googled it the other day and they said that they start at 2,000 feet. It might have changed. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. We were up there, man. That's freaking high. It's freaking high. And you'll die if you hit the ground. Like, that's high. And so we're flying, the ramp goes down, it's stupid loud. And in the movies, you see like everybody talking like conversationally on these military flights. Not a thing. It's way too loud. That's why we use hand signals. So we see the jump master do this, which means everybody stand up. We see him do this, which means everybody hook up. And so we stand up, we hook up, and then we see the green light. He says go. So I start to go, and we do this thing called an airborne shuffle, which is like a half gated run, if you will, half pace run, but your feet never leave the ground. They just shuffle across the floor. And the reason we do that is because the plane's traveling like 300, 400 knots. So, that's 70 people leaving the plane. If you're not out in a very uniformed manner, you're going to be spread across miles, right? Across the battlefield. That's bad. So we try to go out at the same pace so that we're uniformly leaving the plane and we're landing relatively in the same area. A landing zone is what we call it. So we're doing this airborne shuffle. I get to the edge of the ramp. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then I look out the bottom and I do they say never look down. Well, I look down and I see the ground. And I don't know if any of you have ever driven a Ferrari, but a Ferrari has the most amazing brakes of any car I've ever driven. I went from 120 kilometers an hour to literally stopped in like 5 seconds. It was amazing. Well, my brakes set the standard for what Ferraris should be because I stopped on a dime. My toes were literally hanging off the edge of the ramp. And I just stopped. And I'm like, nope, not doing it. They can kick me out of the army. I'm done. This isn't happening. I don't care. I'm going to go tell the jump master I refuse to train, which is military for I quit, basically. Mm-hmm. And I'm done. I'm going to go home. And I felt something hit me in the back. And I'm like, okay. And then I felt it hit me in the back again, and then it hit me in the back again. And all of a sudden I realized there's like 70 people behind me that were all moving the same speed I was. And they are now piling into my back. And about the time I realized this, I just go right out of the airplane. And words cannot describe how loud I screamed. For I don't know how long. I was definitely hoarse by the time I got to the ground. I couldn't talk. But I screamed so freaking loud. They could hear me on the ground screaming. And they thought it was hilarious. I still don't see the humor in it. But anyway, as I'm falling, humor
one more time. Yeah.
As I'm falling and I'm just freaking out, I realized like I need to compose myself. I need to get a hold of myself because if I don't, I'm going to die. Which isn't that mindset was totally not true because my chute was already open and everything was good. I was just so scared that's what my mindset was like. Stephen, get a hold of yourself, get composed, or you're going to die. And so I did. And I started focusing on what I needed to do to land in the landing zone where I needed to be, land correctly so I didn't get hurt, and continue my mission. And so once I did this and started taking action, I realized all of a sudden I don't have time to be scared. All the fear of being high up in the and high, it was gone. And I had no fear because I was too focused on the actions that needed to be taken. So ultimately, long story short, I learned that if I just start taking action, if I orient to whatever is scaring me and start taking steps towards it into that fear, a lot of times that fear dissipates because you're too busy working on the thing. You don't have time to be scared anymore. So if public speaking is something that scares you, go public speak. And once you get on stage and you start talking, all those nerves are going to go away. I promise. So you don't have time. You're too busy worrying about what you have to do and the next thing you need to say. So, whatever scares you, just orient yourself into it and start taking action, start taking steps to go do it. And I promise you, your eyes are going to open to that end. I have jumped out of an airplane probably around 300 to 400 times. It is now my personal favorite hobby in the world. I go skydiving every chance I get. And the highest I've jumped from was 28,400 feet.
That's high.
Yes, very high.
No, thank you. I'm going to let you enjoy that. But what a great way to end, right? In terms of action breeds clarity, and to step into the things that are holding you back. And I think, that's a fantastic advice to end this on. So Stephen, thanks so much for sharing your stories, your wisdom, and your advice today. I would encourage anybody who's listening to the replay, military or not, if you're looking for a coach and you need to level up your leadership capabilities and you want to have a hell of a good time doing it, then Stephen's your guy. So make sure that you run, don't walk, and give him a call or send him an email. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in today. And Stephen, thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much.